Hello, welcome to another episode of the Art Workshop. I'm Christopher Epling. We thank you so much for tuning in to PikeTV today. We have an ink tutorial session that we're going to look at today. We're going to consider different types of inking styles and have a couple reference books. If you can see all the material I have in front of me, this is things that I've brought in for us to look at. I think each one of these items is important. If you are interested in trying ink out as a medium, then today's workshop is for you. Now, we've covered ink in the past. We've talked about inking. We've talked about different styles. We've even talked about cross-hatching, which is a method of applying the ink. But this is special in the sense that we're actually going to build something from the ground up using ink in block styles. Now, ink can be used in different ways. You can actually reduce from ink, so that means you can paint in large surfaces with ink and then actually pull from that. You can put white out or white down on top of that, and you reduce areas and you actually draw in reverse. So instead of adding lines to something, you actually are pulling lines away. I know that sounds a little confusing, but we'll talk about it here shortly. I want to cover a few materials before we get started, and I think we'll go ahead and do that. Now, this is a book that I've brought in. It's a book of a collection of Jack Kirby. Now, Jack Kirby is an artist that was very influential in comics in general. His work is looked at as being the forefront of where comics eventually moved towards. Now, if you think of all the comic movies that are out there today, all the Marvel and DC stuff, all of that was influenced through this original work and this original style from Jack Kirby. Now, of course, there's others, Will Eisner, a few more, but we're looking at Kirby today for a reason. If you notice these heavy dark inks that he's applied to his pages. Now, these are all photocopied pages of the original work that he produced. And today we're looking at this. I'm going to shut the book for a second, though. We're going to look at supplies, and we're going to show you basically what you need in order to produce work such as this. So first and foremost, you need ink. Now, I know those of you who wear glasses, or you may wear contacts, you've probably seen these before. It's a contact lens holder. But what I've done is I've actually changed this into a transportable ink carrier. So if you're actually on the go and you need ink, you can fill that up with ink and then tighten the lid up, and it's easily transported wherever you want to go. So we're going to be using ink, of course. That's the first and foremost tool for today. Different types of ink are out there. You can research those a little bit on your own if you want, and you can find out what it's used for. Now, we also have another type of ink. This is white ink. White ink, of course, is used for mistakes. It's really hard to erase ink, so in fact you can't. But what you can do is you can reduce it, or you can actually eliminate it by painting over top of it. Now, you don't need any of this fancy ink that that is sold in art stores and supply stores. Really, all you need is whiteout. So if you have any whiteout at home, you could pull that. Any felt markers that you have at home, you could use that for inking. The ink that I have today is used with a brush. So this is a Japanese type whiteout. It's called Posca. This is used in the comics industry a whole lot to correct mistakes. And we'll be looking at that actually in Jack Kirby's work in a minute, where he's made mistakes, and we could see actually where he's corrected that. Now, as for tools for today in our drawing tools, I'm going to be using a brush in order to put together today's art lesson. You do not need a brush. If you have, like I said, a felt tip marker at home, a Sharpie, that'll be fine. This is like a Sharpie, except this has 2 points to it. So you just have something that you can apply ink towards. Now, I'm also going to be using a fine tip ink pen for the outline work, and here in a little bit we'll be speed through drawing the outline, and then we'll focus on inking later. Now, they have also created brush pens we've covered before, which has a refillable reservoir of ink inside of the actual handle. Those are available for purchase too in different art supply stores. And then I have another felt tip pen, which has a very thin tip on it. This is for fine detail, and we'll cover that in a second as well. Pencils, you really today don't need a pencil, because I'm going to be showing you the inking style over top of something I've already put together. So if you want to put this together on your own, you could try these in different ways and different methods by just drawing something, then inking around it as I'm going to do today. Of course, we need an eraser for erasing our pencil lines once we're finished. Now, with all that in mind, let's take a look at some of Jack Kirby's early work. we see that Jack Kirby has made mistakes. Now this is all photocopied references of his work. So this is the unpolished version for print, as they say. So looking at Jack Kirby's earlier work, this is all unpolished pages, as we said earlier. You could see that in some of these pages he's made mistakes, and he's used whiteout to compensate for that. If you look close here between these rocks, you might be able to see the white. It may be a little difficult to pull out from on screen, but I'll try to find another page that's a little better example here. These are all, like I said, unpolished pages, so this is the pages that Kirby would actually send in order to be printed. So we have whiteout around the top for the lettering here that he's used. Other examples a little earlier on in his work, around the borders for getting the lines a little straight, more straight you could say, and polishing that up. He used a lot here, and he's even made notes or annotations, but whiteout is absolutely essential when inking. You need it because mistakes are going to be made, different things that you need to rearrange or pull out or change over. Here's actually a lot of whiteout work you can see around the top of the man's head here and along these edges. So what makes Kirby's style so unique though is his heavy inking styles. Kirby was really influential with the way he would position and put together a page for a comic. So you see these panels, how they flow. Well, Kirby started to break free from this form. He would use these panels in different ways. He would reshape them, different sizes. Here's some whiteout again on some of these pages here. But Kirby's influences really extend all the way to modern day and current times with the cartoonists working in the field today. His work was very detailed, shadow was very heavy, and it almost references film noir, which is a type of look that film go for, and usually in mystery or in crime movies, or this heavy shadow work where the shadow is almost a character in the story. Shadow usually makes the reader or viewer feel a little, not so secure. There's some danger elements, unknown, suspense, mystery, those sorts of things. So it adds to the experience of reading or watching a movie when you have this effect going on. So Kirby did that for comics though. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to be looking at this style, this heavy shadow work. And I've actually went ahead and penciled together an example that we're going to be using, which is here. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this really well, but you can tell that's Batman and here's Robin. I've penciled this in already, and what we're going to do, we're going to actually speed draw through the outline portion of this. So this is actually the part where I'm going to be drawing the borders from which inside I will apply all the heavy ink, okay? So let's go ahead now and actually work through the outlining process. It looks like I've already finished up with the process of outlining here. I know that goes by sort of fast. If you're watching from home or trying to follow along, well, you can, but you'd have to move sort of fast, I know. But this is an inking portion tutorial, so what I'm doing now is just blocking out more of the areas that I want to keep white. So all these areas you see that are blocked out, it's almost like the paint by number. If you remember paint by numbers, it's sort of like that in a way, because all of these sections have color, or have ink or don't have ink. So now we're actually going to start applying these heavy lines, and I'm going to open up my contact lens case here, full of good old Pelican ink, and we're going to start to absorb some ink in here. So now all of this section that you see is going to be black. This is all of the heavy shadow areas, and you can see this is just applying the ink down pretty heavily through here. And I have a reference piece down at the bottom, if you could see that. That's what I'm going to be looking at as we move forward. I'm going to be pulling the ink up across the drawing. This is the time where you don't have to worry too much about, being completely a perfectionist with where you're laying down your ink. But when you get down to these sections here where the white should come through, that's where you're going to want to take your time a little bit. This is a large area to ink here, which is going down his shoulder, Batman's shoulder, and across his back. So what I may do is actually, as we continue forward, speed draw through filling in just this back section here. That way you can focus with me and watch more of the detail around the eyes. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go ahead and ink the larger sections to in order to save some time in a second. So that's what I'm doing now. Well, I know that went by really fast, but it's important to get all this dark area in so you're able to see sort of more of the more important, I guess, aspect of this. All of this was just coloring in the ink. So basically I went over inside of the lines or the outline that I've already put down. And I'm applying the ink down heavy. This paper that I've chosen or selected to bring in today probably was not the best choice in terms of applying ink or a wet medium down on this paper, because this paper actually absorbs ink at a fast rate. So the amount of ink it took to actually ink this section was almost half of what I had actually with me. If this had been a vellum paper, which is a smooth surface, that wouldn't have happened. But it's okay, we pushed forward and we made it through it. And now we're at this point. Now you can see at the bottom I'm referencing this as something to go by. Because for this tutorial, sometimes you can get lost in your own space on the page. So you could be actually inking in something and you'll forget, well, this is actually supposed to be, you know, an area where light is coming in or being applied to the page. So what I'm doing now, I'm going in fine detail and I'm going to start to clean up what I've created. Now, this version of Batman actually has the ink coming over to the chin line, and that's what we're going to work on right now. The shadow actually comes in, so all of this area here, and I know at home you're probably like, what are you doing? You're messing this up. But no, actually this is going to just add more shadow to the piece. So we're actually going to be darkening in all of this section here. All of this is going to be dark. It's going to look like I'm totally messing up my drawing, and who knows, maybe I am, but we're going to push forward and try to get this effect. So going down the nose, you can imagine everywhere that there is light, we want to keep white. Everywhere that shadow comes in, we want to apply ink to that section. And that's what we're doing now. And you can see, since we've come out of the fast edit mode, that this is really absorbing this ink. All right? So we're going to apply this ink down. We're going to come over the sections that have shadow, and you can see how I've blocked out that area. That area is not going to be shadowed in. Okay, so we come down the chin line. The type of brush you use makes a big difference too. Brushes come in all sorts of shapes, sizes, and even thickness of the line of the brush itself. If you're going to do any type of ink work, you probably want to select a brush that is not very thick, and you want to select one that's rounded. So that gives you the ability to go across and make very tight lines, which is what we're trying to do right now. Now the shadow actually comes down the face here, and then it comes down this chin line. So that's what we're doing now. We're following this chin line down. Okay. Robin over here to the left has shadow going across the back side of his uniform and then down the side of his face as well. So we're going to try to apply that too while we're here today, so you can see how that looks. So this comes up. Now this will all be shadowed in as well. Now hopefully once I do this, it looks right. It's really, I always get nervous applying heavy shadow across certain areas. Like before I started applying this, I really liked the look of Batman there that I had going on. Now that I'm actually going in and putting this detail in, I'm just hoping and praying that when I'm finished, it looks something similar to my reference piece that I'm looking at. Okay, let's keep on applying this down so that we can get it nice and filled in all through here. This version of Batman has a lot of shadow, and that's what we're trying to pull across right now. Okay. If you're at home and you're applying this, let's say you've sketched out a figure and you're trying to apply ink to it, we have a tutorial that we've created and it's one of the past episodes of the art workshop where we talk about lighting. That's super important whenever you're creating a piece, when you think about where your lighting will be. And an easy way to think about that is to think about it in terms of shadowing, right? So if you have a round circle or a ball and you apply light to that, the backside, whatever part of the ball is not facing the light, is going to have the most shadow. So you think about what we call your light source with a drawing. And in this particular example we're using today, the light source for this will probably be coming from over here, right? So the parts of this is being shadowed in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over it, and I'm going to really focus in on the detail, the fine detail portions of the drawing. There's some parts of this that have shadow that I don't want to apply with this brush. I actually want to apply with the felt pen, and that's going to come in just a minute. But this is the portion of the tutorial where we're going back and we're tightening up some of these areas, okay? It's starting to look okay, but we still have a lot of work to do. This eye over here requires shadow. Once you start actually going back over, if you make a mistake, you can use white ink or white out to correct that mistake. But I always try to go ahead and get it right, because applying that later on really can be troublesome, because some inks do not take any type of application of any white out or white paint on top of it at all very well. In fact, some just absolutely will not accept it. So be careful, I guess. And what I'm saying, if you do make a mistake, there's always that option of going back over it and correcting later. But you know, getting it sort of right the first time is going to save you a lot of time. All right, I'm still using the brush for the detail here. I'm going to switch to the felt pen towards the end to really try to bring out the rest of the cross hatching, and we'll talk a little bit about that as soon as I get to it. So let's go ahead and try to finish up this portion of Batman's face, getting everything in line so we have the lines that we need and the shadow that we need. Blocking this out, Jack Kirby was a master at doing this. I'm absolutely not a master at it, but I'm learning. And that's what you at home should look at this as. This is your opportunity to learn too. You're trying out something maybe you're a little uncomfortable with, but that's how you get better at something. You continue to work at it. And whether your interest is in sports, or let's say music or film, or whatever it is that you enjoy doing, you know, try to put more time towards it. When I go to schools and I talk to students in schools, I always mention, ask who in the class likes to play video games, and a lot of hands go up, right? And video games are great. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, the reason I ask that though is, you know, if you take a little bit of time out of doing maybe some things that you do as a hobby for fun, and apply it towards maybe something that you're interested in that you're not as maybe you don't feel you're as good at, or you want to get better at, then you will eventually get better at it. I hope to one day be a good artist. I don't think I am a good artist, but you know, artists are usually their own worst critics, and that's very true in my case. I know that much. So what I'm doing now is going back over it, and I'm looking at these areas that still need shadow. Hair is very difficult to pull off with shadowing, but if you approach it in a sort of a light way and don't think about it too much, you can pull it off. Robin's hair has various lines going up into the top part of his hair here, which looks like it's you know, kind of it's raised up off his head. So we want to have the shadows underneath some portions of the hair. So we're going to draw most of the shadows closer to his face, and leaving less lines towards the back of his head. These hairs here will be actually coming off of his head a little bit, so hopefully we can get that effect going. Also at the top here we have some hairs going off to the side, so I want to pull that out too a little bit. Whenever you're going over with the brush, you want to be careful to not absorb too much ink, because when you go over top of your drawing with the brush, you can actually drop ink off of your brush onto the canvas, which can lead to a giant mess. So be careful with that as well. I think really looking at the Batman on this side here, looking at Batman, I think it actually looks pretty good, pretty similar to what's on the example I have below. I'll go ahead and put the bat symbol in. I didn't draw this with pencil first, so this is going to be a little tricky. Using a brush like I'm doing right now to make lines, you actually, as you as you start to lay down the lines, you're twisting the brush. So I'm twisting the handle of the brush a little bit. I've actually clipped off the end of this this brush handle. It used to be a lot longer. I clipped it off for two reasons. Number one, having a smaller handle gives me more control, or at least it feels like it does. And then on top of that too, it fits nice in my carry case. So those two reasons I clipped it off. So we're going to go ahead and add now the bat symbol on his chest. It's turning out okay. If I'd penciled this in earlier, it may have worked a little better. Now you can see I'm pulling a lot of ink onto my brush, and I'm putting it in there, and it's absorbing it really, really quickly. But that's okay, because we're almost to the point where we're starting to use the nib pens, which is what we'll carry out and end the tutorial with. If you want examples on inking at home, and let's say you haven't drawn something, go online, go to YouTube, and search for ink tutorials. And what you'll have is a large range of options on different types of videos you can watch to see how ink's applied, and you can even sketch something out there at home and do it as well. Okay? Alright, now we have somewhat of a Batman and somewhat of a Robin. And with that in mind, now what we're going to do is lay our brush aside, and we're going to pull up our nib pen. And this is the small tipped nib, so or felt tip marker. And what we'll use with this is to go back up and actually do some cross-hatching. Cross-hatching works where you make lines going parallel to one another like this, and then you go back on top and you cross over almost like you're making X's. Okay, this is cross-hatching. The tighter you make these lines together, so if I did these really, really close together like this, and then went back over with lines really, really close together like that, this almost looks like just one solid dark surface, but it's not. Okay, and that's the effect that we want. So we're going over to the shoulder here, and we're going to actually start doing some cross-hatching. And so we're making these parallel lines going down, and then we've got to go back up. Now you can actually start to bend these lines a little bit to give the effect of there's a shape of the curvature of something. So when you bend the lines, when you go to cross-hatching, you're actually able to show curvature of any object you're drawing. And you notice how I've bent these, they're rounded coming out, so it gives the look that this is bending. I want to go back to the section above his brow here, his eyebrow, because this needs work too. So we're going to go back in and actually start to darken in more of these areas. This is your touch-up work. This is where you can go in and really hopefully make things pop out well. You know, pull things together a little bit more, and hopefully your drawing starts to come together. Right here going up the neck is an area that I'd like to also put some cross-hatching. So I'm going to pull these lines out coming up this way. And I'm going to go back over going the opposite direction. This is an effect that you can give this effect in most any pen and ink drawings that you try to accomplish or tackle. I love the look of cross-hatching. Edward Gorey is an artist that we focused on in an art workshop in the past. He does all cross-hatching work, and his work is just amazing. Connecting this now to the solid black surface and objects that we've applied here, and when I say objects, I mean those blocks that you saw earlier. That's the goal. So we don't want this to look like these cross-hatchings are sort of just floating out in space somewhere on our drawing. We want them to seem like they're coming out from the darkened area that's already there. Okay? He has a couple of lines here on his chest coming down. So add those in. And then of course the neck too, going up this way where the light is coming in. Now you notice that all the cross-hatching that I've done has been on the right side of whatever it is we're looking at, for the exception of over here on the cape part that's going over his back. The reason for that, light is coming in from this direction. Okay, so you want to keep all your shadows in the appropriate side that is opposite to where your light is coming in. Okay, it's real important to think about that while you're drawing, so that you don't make the mistake of adding a shadow where light should be coming in. Okay, and that's all we're doing now, is just going around the borders of these solid blacks that we've done, and we're adding in a little more of the detail. Okay, also the top here we can do a little bit more work going across his his mask, the top of the head, just going towards the top of the head, and then adding some more cross-hatching like that. If you go around most of the border shapes that you've created, whenever you darken in something, you'll get that effect and it'll look really nice, okay? We'll go over to Robin for a second too. Robin actually has more lines coming up the forehead. My brush tip is pretty thick that I use for this tutorial. So what I want to do is use the felt tip and take advantage of the thin, small tip that this has in order to create these small lines that are coming off of Robin's forehead. Also down on the side of his neck, and then also for his uniform as well. These lines couldn't be accomplished with the brush, so pay attention to the size of the brush that you use. Let's say you want to go purchase some art supplies and you have some things in mind that you'd like to do with those, such as inking. Please take my suggestion of getting very, very small tip brushes and make sure that they're rounded brushes as well. If they're chiseled or if they're square or if they're other shapes than round, you're going to have a really hard time pulling off some of these details. A lot of ink in today's workshop, and a lot of applying that ink in ways that we see shadow making lines. So if you look at Batman's figure here, all of this is darkened in, but even just leaving the white here around the top of his eyebrow and also down the nose and chin, this drawing seems that we can see that there's more to it in this area, but we can't see, right? And that's the main goal with ink, is to make things appear even if you can't see them. You can imagine that there's more to his face going and continuing with the lines we can see. That's the goal with ink, okay? Jack Kirby's a master at it, but you and I are learning and will continue to learn together here on the Art Workshop. So I really appreciate you tuning in today. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Ink is a hard medium to get used to, but if you get the right tools and you have things to help out if you mess up, you should have a lot of fun and learning and getting the hang of it. So thanks again for tuning in. Thanks to PikeTV for making this show available to you. And until next time, I'm Chris Epling, and keep drawing.